Knight, pledged loyalty to their lord, excel in advanced swordsmanship, and skilled in combat. Ninja, known for their exceptional abilities, mastery of various tools, and expertise in stealthy operations. In this era full of war, these two entities, namely knights and ninjas, were never supposed to meet, because they themselves have vast differences in terms of fighting style, culture, speaking style, behavior, and many other things. But for young female knight, it seemed like such a thing didn't seem to exist. As it was now, she never imagined that they would already be her side. Today this man, a knight, is the leader of the 3rd squad of the Sun Kingdom Knights, who will carry out a mission in this place. This man and his troops are preparing for a medium-scale battle. Then their mission is the subjugation of monsters in this dungeon, which will soon begin. This young woman is a knight, and is one of the troops who will take part in the monster subjugation mission. Her name is Komi Sarah. She in charge of training the 3rd squad rookies. It was seen that 2 rookie knights seemed to be looking for another rookie who had not yet been seen on this mission, and they thought that Sarah was not strict enough in training him in terms of discipline. But it seemed that was not the case. It turned out that what they had been looking for was already in front of them, a knight who looked shy and lazy. He was also playing with something in his hand. The 2 of them who saw this man suddenly in front of them were suddenly shocked, because previously he had not been visible in front of them, and now he appeared with an eve of presence that was not felt at all. They call him Naito. For them, Naito is always sneaky as usual, and he was almost invisible before. And they also asked where Naito was before when the captain was talking about preparations for this mission. But in his usual tone and innocence, accompanied by his lazy face, he only answered that previously he was only playing new puzzle games. This rookie with an annoyed face thinks Naito is an introvert, and he's been doing this for 6 months since he joined. Then the other rookie also seemed annoyed by what Naito was doing and his nonchalant attitude. This rookie also tried to disturb him with his feet, but Naito immediately wriggling as if he didn't care about what he was doing. His name is Naito. He comes from a rare island nation called Jupangu in the east, until he finally was able to be here because previously, he barely passed the entrance test with a marginal score. He also was kind of an introverted guy and quirky rookie. Suddenly when they looked away a little, Naito suddenly disappeared, then was no longer visible in front of them, and they were confused by that. It turned out that Naito was behind Sarah to be under the protection and avoid interference from the 2 of them. She was also curious by his very antisocial attitude. For them, Naito won't care if they continue to bully him, and they also seem to think that bullying him is useless, because Naito is just a weak person and has an annoying past. Finally, after making preparations and arranging plans, they went into the cave for the subjugation of dungeon monsters mission. The knights began to enter the place. They walked through a long corridor, while looking around the surroundings. All this was done in order to minimize surprise attacks that occurred, so that they could prevent a surprise attack from occurring. There can see that Naito is also paying attention to his surroundings. When he entered this place, it seemed like he still hadn't seen any dangerous movements that would appear. So for now he had to remain alert and widen his field of vision. On the other side, Sarah seems worried about Naito's condition, because lately he always gets the task of exploring dungeons, but he seems to be fine with that. Sarah also doesn't like Naito's character. When she talks to him, his gaze is always in another direction, and that made her a little annoyed. Finally, after passing through a long hallway in the dungeon, they began to enter the underground dungeon. Then the knights also began to observe this area, as saying when exploring the previous hallway in order to minimize danger. While traveling through the dungeon, Naito noticed something was wrong on this floor. It seemed he knew that the dangerous thing was some kind of trap or other detrimental thing. It looks like they are walking carefully in that place. Naito always pays attention to the floor, and the other rookies always pay attention to their surroundings. But this rookie doesn't pay attention to the area of the floor. Until finally, Naito found out that the rookie behind him wasn't paying attention to the situation on the dungeon floor, and he was too late to tell him about it. Because the rookie didn't pay attention to what was underneath him. He accidentally stepped on a strange floor. It looked like the floor was pressed when he stepped on it. He was confused about what he had stepped on, and why when he stepped on this floor it felt like pressed. Suddenly something unexpected happened. When the rookie stepped on a strange floor, the wall behind him appeared from below, and blocked their way out of the dungeon, but can see from Naito's face that this didn't surprise him, as if he already knew what was going to happen. They were both shocked when they saw this, and Sarah tried to understand whether it was a trap. Then that captain blamed the rookie for being reckless with what he did. But this rookie actually blamed Naito, because this rookie only followed Naito's steps when walking straight forward, even though they were both stepping on the same floor. He also admitted his mistake and apologized for this, because Naito's walking style has its unique. They were confused about what was happening, with a wall suddenly appearing in front of them. Then the captain told the troops to remain alert for what was going to happen, but there was more than one large shadow right behind the knights. Slowly, they began to look behind them to see what the big shadow actually was. It turned out that the large shadows behind them were 4 large monsters, each of which was carrying a large log weapon. It could be seen that the knights were starting to panic at the presence of these 4 large monsters. They are big, have bald heads and stumpy faces, and look stupid. There is no mistaking these monsters as trolls. They were confused and panicked about how it was possible that in this not too big dungeon there were 4 large trolls. Then middle in this panic, the captain convinced his troops to remain calm and not panic. They took out their weapons to prepare to fight. The knights began to carry out their plan. With this large monster, they didn't want to take the risk of attacking up close, but by attacking with sword skills from afar, they immediately attacked with a burst wave. Unexpectedly, their burst wave attack, which was carried out at the same time, did not work at all on the troll. Those who saw that the attack from afar did not work on the troll began to panic and become confused. Because their attacks didn't work, the trolls began to advance in preparation to attack the knights using large logs. The attack carried out by the 2 trolls using a large log was very strong, causing the knights in front of them to lose instantly when hit by the attack, and the effect of the attack was area-specific. It was really a great attack because the knights lost instantly, even though the attack was only launched by 2 trolls, and the destructive power caused by the trolls' attack was also large. Could see the damage in the area? It seemed that only Sarah was left. She was scared at the moment because her opponents were very strong, and they all lost quickly. Sarah concluded that the trolls were not carrying out ordinary attacks, but they were attacking with magic blows so that the attack power released was so great. It looks like Naito is also unconscious as a result of the attack, and Sarah is currently also suffering from injuries from the attack, so she can't move now. The trolls started to approach Sarah to attack, and now she was injured, so she couldn't run and her comrades had lost in one attack. But for Sarah, even if the knights were still not defeated and fought with full strength against the trolls, it would still be impossible for them to defeat the trolls. With a strong fighting determination, she will continue to fight. She will bet everything on the one attack she will soon launch. When the energy for the attack has been gathered, Sarah uses her sword to try to attack the trolls, using a technique called line slash. These trolls seemed shocked by the attack that would soon come their way. The line slash sword technique is a technique that resembles a burst wave, but this technique is the strongest version, apart from the large slashing scale. And of course, its destructive power is also large. But there is a weakness in this technique, namely the slashing speed is so slow that it makes the trolls who even have large bodies easily avoid the attack. Sarah, who saw that her attack could be easily avoided by the trolls, was very shocked, and she was still confused as to why this could happen. And finally, her slashing only hit the dungeon wall. This troll also knew that the attack that Sarah carried out was a magic attack. For them, it would be dangerous if they were hit by an attack like that. Now Sarah has completely run out of energy because after using the line slash skill, she didn't expect that her attack could be jumped by these big monsters, and thought that they were not ordinary monsters. It turned out that Naito had not completely lost consciousness, and Sarah told him to run away. She had indeed run out of magic, but she could still use sword techniques for a few minutes, holding Naito back to find a way out of this place. Naito could only remain silent hearing her words, and Sarah, with remaining strength, would carry out the final battle against the trolls. Suddenly, Naito took out a small object from his hand and inserted a needle into the small object right in the middle. Then he used the object by blowing to remove it. It turned out that the object was a weapon like a shooter that was used in the mouth. He shot the needle right behind Sarah's neck until she was shocked by what happened, and it felt like she had been stung by a bee. It wasn't an ordinary needle, but could see from the look on her face that she seemed to have been affected by something when the needle hit the back of her neck. Finally, as a result of this, Sarah fell. Naito finally got up. It turned out that all this time he had only been pretending to be injured. Then that the needle contained poison that he made from the start. And now Sarah won't wake up for a while. Naito has gotten up and looks like he has no injuries at all. Then his body is still fit. Now he has no choice but to finish off the trolls. The trolls also looked confused, even though previously they were sure that there are no more knights still surviving. But in fact, there was still someone who was still alive and not injured. For Naito, he finally did this because he didn't want Sarah to end up in a place like this, and she was a good person. He also didn't believe that this army of knights could be defeated so quickly by them. Seeing him talk too much seemed to make the trolls sick, and they attacked Naito at the same time. It looked like Sarah could still survive, and now she seemed numb and couldn't move anything. When she looked ahead, there was Naito who was walking towards the front alone. It turned out that Naito was walking towards the rampaging trolls alone, and that made Sarah worried. When the trolls attacked him at the same time, Naito suddenly disappeared in front of them. He quickly seemed to dodge all the attacks. These trolls were confused about what happened to the man, and where exactly he was now. How shocked Sarah was by what she saw. It turned out that Naito was right behind the troll. How could he be in a place like that? And his whereabouts were still unknown to the trolls. It seems that Sarah is now not worried about Naito's condition. She is just confused because why is he still there doing nothing? While the trolls were confused about his existence, Naito was seen to be very relaxed when he was near the trolls and was playing around a little. He continued playing around there. And what made her wonder was why the trolls still couldn't feel his existence. Naito also seems to enjoy this when he is near the trolls. That trolls are still confused about Naito's existence, while Sarah seems annoyed by what he did. She's annoyed because he's just playing around, not doing anything. These trolls thought he was carrying out a tactic, and told him to get out immediately. Finally, Naito, after playing around a bit, immediately took out his sword to attack. He would attack using concealment techniques, and use a combination of attacks for the final result. Two trolls in front of him were immediately slashed with force by Naito without any mercy. His attack was on such a large scale that he was able to defeat two trolls at once. Then the other three remaining trolls were also immediately finished off by Naito using the line slash skill, the same skill used by Sarah, a technique that can defeat the enemy in one large-scale attack. The trolls were confused about what happened to them and why they could lose all at once. Sarah, who saw Naito's true abilities, was very surprised, even though she had always been with him. So she knew how far Naito had progressed, but right now he was different from the usual Naito. It looks like he can defeat all the trolls without any difficulty, and he defeats all the trolls in one attack with a line slash. Naito seems to have mastered the magic sword technique a long time ago, and only now is he using it to fight all the trolls, and even then he is forced to do so. For him, the technical power of the knight is very great. As a ninja, he cannot match this power attack. He can conclude this because in the last half year, he realized that the depth of swordsmanship and the special technique that utilize magical power are truly wonderful. That now he was confused whether he should wait for Sarah to wake up first or not, then search a good reason when this troll was defeated, so as not to involve him. It looks like Naito will return to pretending to be unconscious again, and describes the defeat of the troll as the work of Sarah, who used a line slash to defeat the troll. He started looking at Sarah, whether she was conscious or not. It turns out that all this time she was aware and didn't faint. Then she asked what made her suspicious, who Naito really was. A very shocked expression appeared on Naito's face. He couldn't say anything, and she must have seen Naito with what he did to all the trolls. He looked confused and asked Sarah how she couldn't faint when she was poisoned. She knows that the one who poisoned her was Naito. Then Sarah says that in the past, she could endure poison from many monsters of time and have developed a resistance to it, just like a gorilla. It turned out that Naito's suspicions were correct. Sarah knew everything that Naito was doing, such as being behind the troll without being noticed and playing around there. He was very surprised that she had seen everything, and he reasoned that because he was using a concealment technique, his presence could not be noticed by the trolls. In the end, Naito could only surrender, because this was the first time someone could see the movement of his concealment technique. He also admitted that he was a jounin. Naito admitted that Sarah was not an ordinary person, because she was the only person who could see the movement of his concealment technique. He also asked about Naito's statement about being a jounin, which meant that he was a ninja, and Sarah also received news that there was a spy from Japangu. It's true that Naito is a jounin in his village. Among the jounin, he is the most outstanding, but she doesn't question things about jounin. Sarah thought that Naito was a spy who joined the night squad. She also didn't think that he had been training him in swordsmanship for 6 months. That's ridiculous. Now Sarah suspects that when Naito will finish her off. For him, because someone already knew his identity, then eliminating might be the right choice to complete his secret mission. Referred to righteous heart. Ninjas undergo mental training that justifies any inhumane act if it serves their lord. It's to prevent themselves from breaking. Don't take it the wrong way. Hearing what Naito said, Sarah seemed angry and started preparing to hold the sword to do a counterblow. But at the moment, he didn't think at all about finishing off Sarah and would refrain from doing so. Hearing what Naito said, he was shocked. Sarah was confused as to why he didn't do it. He tried to think of something. Naito began to explain the reason, because for 6 months, Sarah always found various ways to teach him as a knight, and she had been very kind to Naito all this time. Then after that she always found him wherever Naito was, from trees or rooftops. Even though all this time he had continued to train hard to ensure that no one found him, who would have thought that the only one to find him through his concealment technique was Sarah? Having lived in the shadows all this time, he felt for the first time that his existence was acknowledged. Though it goes against the righteous heart, he didn't want to finish Sarah. For Naito, that means he has failed as a ninja, and that's embarrassing. Then Sarah asks him, what will Naito do now? He began to explain to Sarah about what he would do now. If there is a way to carry out mission while keeping Sarah-san alive, and there are 2 options.